Hello and welcome back to the Bacon, Bibles, and Barbells Podcast. I am Coach Amanda. I'm here with Coach Bill today, and we're going to be discussing diet periodization, what it is, why we use it, and how to actually use it. First of all, though, let's catch up on how everyone is doing. Bill, how's your week been going?
It's okay. I'm back in the gym now. I took a little break for just some grieving. We were just sort of doing some closure, some losses in our family, and I needed to do that anyhow because my joints were killing me. And so I took probably around a week and a half off, and then I was back yesterday. Felt good. Big carb feeding and big workouts. Nice. So for the next, I think, 3 or 4 days, I'll probably eat, 400 or 500 grams of carbs. That probably sounds like a lot. However, I will also probably eat almost no fat. That will mostly come from just protein, really lean protein, and fruit, right? And so today, for example, I've had, something like 5 bananas and I don't know, like 70 grapes and 4 or 5 kiwis, some apples, some cantaloupe, etc., and then some whey, egg whites, and a little bit of really lean chicken. So just a few things to help me carb load, but do so in a way that doesn't just store a ton of fat and still sort of gets my FGF going. And training will still center around training chest and back 4 times a week, arms 4 times a week, but blocked out in a way that allows me to recover. So I do an asynchronous split that's every other day. So there's plenty of time. And then my set volume is pretty, I would say low to moderate. It's not low in the sense that it's not one working set or something like that, but it's probably more the upper limit of what most people would be familiar with if they were familiar with like Dorian Yates' Blood and Guts, where it's about 5 sets per large body part, 3 to 4 for smaller body parts. And rep scheme is just whatever is comfortable for, whatever I'm doing, depending on my joints and things like that. So it'll be mostly chest and back will be the heaviest work, and then biceps, triceps every day, shoulders every day. Legs will be every day too, but they'll be split up into 2 times a week. So quads and calves on 2 of the days, and then on the other 2 days it's hamstrings and glutes, and just basically one exercise, couple of sets per, just to maintain while I'm building the upper body up.
Yeah. So you said like 70 grapes. Are you counting by the grape, or are you measuring that, like weighing
I
out?
do. Yeah, I do. So a seedless grape is around 3 calories. And so I just sort of determine how many calories of grapes I want to eat in a sitting, and then I just count them out. I freeze them just because I like to. I put a little bit of, good. Yeah, I put a little bit of honey on them. Freezing them actually makes them a little harder to digest, which is kind of cool because you get a little less of the calories, but maybe like a minimal amount, maybe half a calorie difference. But it also leaves you fuller. And then, like I said, I use a little bit of honey on there, and it freezes the honey to them. So you have a little bit of honey on each grape. Probably no more.
Sounds like a candy.
Yeah, it is like a good dessert. And so that'll be, I'm eating a lot of fruit right now. I'll do that for this week. Just to carb load without gaining a ton of water at the same time. So I cut off water at around noon. I don't drink any more water after noon, and so I have about 2.5 liters before noon, and then all my carbs the rest of the day are just dry. And so that's kind of how I keep it from bloating me, but still get good performance in the gym. My pump yesterday was really, really ridiculous. So do a week of that, and then I'll go back to mostly just red meat, fruit, cheese, and the stuff I've been eating, just to stay healthy.
Nice. How long has it been since you've been off of your mini cut now?
It's been, 3 weeks, I think. I have not gained a single pound. In fact, I lost down to 220 even now. So I've actually lost weight.
Wow.
Continue to lose weight. And that's the effect of a mini cut if it's done right.
Yeah.
Sometimes your body just takes a second to catch up. You lose quite a bit of tissue, and what happens is your fat cells, they tend to fill up with water when they evacuate very quickly, and so you'll have these kind of whooshes. And so I was at around 223 when I finished my mini cut, and right now I'm around 220.
Nice. So good job on that. That typically happens to me when I come out of a pretty steep cut as well. Is like the next 1 to 2 weeks, there's still
Yeah.
some weight coming off for sure, and then
Yeah.
it'll kind of stay even.
Sure. And there's some strategies that, I use in coming back, eating more resistant starch and a few things like that sort of make digestion a little bit more difficult. That helps. So right now I'm up to 3,200 calories, and the weight is still sort of coming off. It'll probably level out, I would imagine, in the next week or so once I carb load. And I would imagine I'll land somewhere around 221, 222 and be able to hang there for the rest of the summer. And I won't build much muscle over the summer, but in maintenance, you can build a little bit. And then I'll go back to a more focused bulk, probably a 200-300 calorie surplus for the rest of the year. And so that will have been a year of attempting to put on some muscle in some places where I was lagging a little bit.
Yeah, when you've been working out for a long time, you got to kind of do the extreme methods
You-
to get that
you
muscle
do.
to want to grow again.
You do.
Yeah. Well, for me, I am not really changing much as far as weight on the scale, but I am seeing some differences in physique, which is great. I actually was just picking something up in the yard recently, and my husband stopped to take a picture real quick to show me when I was bending over. Look, your hamstrings, they're showing, and at your body fat percentage right now. So I was like, yes, that's a huge win to be able to see that when I'm not really cutting right now. So I'm hoping next stage look is going to be entirely different from the last time I competed. So it seems like adding more leg volume is actually making a difference, thankfully. I am supposed to be adding more cardio in, but I am just having a hard time finding where to fit it in. And it's not that I don't have the time. It's that I changed my gym time, and now it's where I was doing cardio, and I'm just hungry when I get back now. I used to do fasted cardio first thing. So then I've got to eat, and then, there's homeschooling to do, and there's other things that I have that I probably should just make myself do the cardio, but I'm having a hard time fitting it in. But thankfully, I have been sticking to nutrition, so I'm not seeing any negative effects on the scale, though. So
Yeah, it's
still
it's
going.
tough. It's
Yeah.
tough because cardio becomes a real annoyance there at the end, and especially as you get closer to competition time and things too. It's I've got one competitor that's got a few shows coming up, so we're going from the off to the on season, and this first show is always the hardest. Discipline's tough. We end up having to do something like 2 hours of cardio, 3 hours of cardio at the end of prep and things like this, and she's having to use it's a diuretic, but it's one that's not ingested. So I don't know if you're familiar with those, but basically you just put them on the skin and it draws water out of the skin. And she does that while she's doing her cardio, and she hates it because it burns the skin a little bit, and it's just
Yeah, they heat up, right?
Yeah, it heats up, but it's a little safer than a diuretic early on. But she's at the point now where she's having to find places to just fit the cardio in because it's 30 minutes at a time, and she's got something like 3 or 4 sessions, and we're not nearly where we need to be because we've had some discipline issues along the way. First show is always tough, in a season, because you're coming in out of an off season where you've been able to eat, pretty well, a lot of food and work real hard, and you feel good. And now, you come down and it's real tough to maintain, but the cardio is one of the hardest things to get her to do. She'll do all the nutrition stuff in the world, but the cardio is tough because of timing and boredom and tiredness, and all those things.
Yeah, it's always a balancing act with whether to pull back calories more or to add more cardio. But at some point, the carbs are just so low, you have to make sure micronutrients are still getting in, and you can't really pull that back much more. You've got to add the more cardio, and you've got to split it up because you can't do 2-3 hours at a time.
Well, it's, the thing is with most people that are not doing shows, the typical question would be, are you more hungry or are you more tired? And if they're tired, then you take away food. And if they're hungry, then you add activity, because they're basically answering to you the thing that they're able to do. But with shows, you basically sort of get both. right? Which is you get to starve and you get to do more activity, which is a fun ride.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's a good place to lead us into our conversation today, talking about these changes. This is diet periodization. So first of all, like training periodization, this can be done in cycles, mesocycles, macrocycles, and various ways. You can plan out your whole year and kind of know what you want your diet to look like, or you can just take it one phase at a time and ask almost week by week, is it time for me to go in or out of cutting, bulking, and whatever it may be. So I want to start with defining some terms like cutting and fat loss are typically interchangeable on a phase for diet periodization. Bulking or muscle gain are typically interchangeable as well. And then there's some other terms like reverse dieting that have a certain place, and whether you're going to maintenance or whatever it may be. So, Bill, can you help us define some of the terms associated with diet periodization?
yeah, totally. So simplistically, right, cutting and fat loss, or even weight loss, which is not really a great term to use along with the other two, it typically means that you're trying to reduce the number on the scale, trying to reduce the number of inches or centimeters on the body in certain areas by reducing body fat, right, is the hope. Nobody's really out to lose muscle. And so we automatically assume when you're using those terms, you typically mean fat loss. So cutting is synonymous with fat loss. And for most people, weight loss is also synonymous with fat loss. And so this is going to be a period of restriction. And yes, restriction is necessary to some degree. But there's going to be a period of restriction where you're looking to reach a goal weight or goal body composition. And you're going to use basically a calorie deficit to do that. And then, of course, maintenance is pretty simple. You're trying to maintain your body weight, but something that should be clarified there is that you can't maintain it on the dot, and you shouldn't look to. In fact, maintenance should be a 5-pound range, right, that you keep your body fluctuating in. Some people can fluctuate body weight up to 10 pounds in a week, depending on what they consume, and sodium and water and activity, stress, lack of sleep, and all these kinds of things. So a good 5-pound buffer is what you want to use to determine if you're in maintenance. If you're just sort of vacillating in between those 5 pounds, you're typically in maintenance, or you're in enough of a cycle of surplus and deficit during a week that it puts you in maintenance by the end of the cycle calorically. And then bulking, this one is tough because there's definitely a bunch of anti-bulking rhetoric that's going around now in the science-based lifting community. They're wrong, and I'm going to tell why in a little bit when we get more into this. But essentially, bulking is traditionally thought to be overfeeding while you exercise more, right, in the attempt to grow muscle and lean tissue. And of course, you expect some body fat gain at that point as well. And so it's the attempt to basically gain weight, but to gain lean tissue. So sort of the opposite of cutting, where you want to cut fat. In this way, you want to gain muscle, right? And you don't want to lose muscle on cutting, and you don't want to gain fat with bulking, although a little bit of each is probably going to happen on either side typically. It's really, really hard to be perfect with all of that. And then reverse dieting is just a name for metabolic sort of resetting. And there's one thing that should be noted about this is there's nothing magical about a metabolic reset. You are literally just rehydrating your body and seeing where you are with all of your muscular water intact, and with some of your subcutaneous water stores intact, and allowing your body to sort of get used to that increased intake of food volume digestively, water volume probably from food and from beverage consumption, increased sodium most likely. If you're eating more food, you're probably eating more seasonings, and salt is probably the primary one. And so what you're doing is you're allowing your body to upregulate all of those systems that handle some of those metabolic processes, and then sort of get to an equilibrium where it goes, I gained 6 pounds when I went back to maintenance. And then, a few weeks later, you're actually only up 2 pounds, because that's what your weight is when you're rehydrated and healthy after your cut. And so reverse dieting is really just sort of the process of slowly introducing food volume so that your body can upregulate those processes naturally. Part part of the problem with jumping straight into a bulk is that you are primed for fat gain. And if you don't do that correctly, you will gain more fat typically in the early stages of that bulk than you would like, right? And so reverse dieting is really important to make sure our body is primed to put on lean tissue versus just throwing on a bunch of fat because it's desperate to put weight back on after a cut.
Right. Yeah. Reverse dieting is more of an in-between kind of phase. It is part of periodization, but you can go from a bulk straight into a cut, not really have a lot of ramifications from it. I would typically instruct to do a little bit of a maintenance phase first because it can be really difficult mentally and on your hunger signals to switch that fast, but not quite the same repercussions that you could get if you go straight to bulk calories from a cut. So it's kind of that slow process, slowly adding calories back. And there's different rates to do it. Some people will go straight back to maintenance out of a cut. Others will add a little bit more gradually. And that can be person by person. For me, I prefer the gradual approach. I feel like it's too much of a digestive attack if I go all the way right back up to maintenance. Of course, that depends on how steep the cut was. If it was, for a show and I'm just coming off of a show, there's probably no way I could even eat at maintenance right away because my stomach is shrunk.
Yeah, it'd be dangerous anyway. I mean, you see people do that. You'll see them go to shows and they celebrate the show afterwards, like going out and binging, and they wake up the next day and they go, I put on 20 pounds. It's so dangerous to put on 20 pounds of water and food volume. That is incredibly hard on your body. And so I agree that gradual approach is best if you're in a deep cut, just because your body is already stressed, and it does take a toll, right, on organ function and things like that. And so we do have to sort of let the body back regulate some of those things naturally. I agree that gradual approach is the key.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's good to maybe overshoot that first week and then add, not way overshoot, but a little higher of an increase that first week out of a deep cut, and then kind of slowly add back because especially out of very deep cut, you're also likely nutrient deprived. And so you kind of want to get those foods back in, but food choice is really important here, not just going out and getting whatever food you can get at any restaurant, but really the same foods you have been eating should just be increased in volume a little bit as you're coming out.
Yeah, I think a good rule of thumb is that for that first week or two, just take the total deficit that you have. So if you're at a deficit of 1,000 calories, for example, a day, then you would take half of that, 500, and add that back in for that first week. Right. I think that's a pretty good rule of thumb.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're not a competitor, which is what a lot of our audience is non-competitors just wanting to know how to do these things, what are the reasons for doing any kind of diet periodization in the first place? Just for the regular Joe Schmo who wants to be healthy and have some body recomposition going on. What is the purpose for even doing diet periodization instead of just sticking with a set amount of calories and macros?
Yeah, I mean, so one thing I will say is that for beginners, that can probably work for a little bit. If you stay on a maintenance diet, if you know you're maintaining your body weight on what you're eating and it's your first year of training, you could probably get some recomposition just doing that. That would be fine. That's going to fail pretty catastrophically going forward, though. And so, and that's just because your body adapts to that, to resistance exercise and sort of the rhythm of your life in that regard. And so it learns to use nutrients in different ways and upregulate some processes and downregulate others. And so you will have to make some changes. And so the purpose of it is because you can't always infinitely build muscle from basically maintenance calories. And you definitely cannot infinitely lose fat from maintenance calories. That's not going to happen. And so the idea is that as your body becomes more used to just the fitness lifestyle in general, you need to do a couple of things. One, you need to add lean tissue because you're helping your metabolic activity pretty strongly there. And let me be clear, you're not taking the amount of calories that you burn in a day and multiplying it by 10. Like some people will tell you that if you put on muscle, you're just going to burn all these calories like a furnace. It's really not true. You're probably going to burn an extra 10 calories a day, if you add on like 5 pounds of muscle. It's really not that much. However, what it does do is the muscle allows you to work harder in the gym, and it requires more nutrition for its upkeep when it's working. And so when it's working, you tend to burn more calories because you are working harder and more often. And so when you have more body mass in general, right, you do burn more calories. And so you may see a fairly sharp increase in calories if you gain something like 50 pounds over the course of years. If you were fairly small and you go from 150 pounds to 200 pounds and you're fairly lean, then you'll see some significant increase in calorie intake there. But most of what you'll see is your ability to lift heavier weights, to go for longer, to train harder and more intensely, which then gives you sort of a return on your recovery and what it requires to just sort of keep you going in general as a human being. Yes, when you gain muscle, your organs have to work harder. No, that's not going to kill you. That's an insane assertion that some people have out there on the net right now.
Yeah. Something having to work harder doesn't mean it's a bad thing.
That is wild. In fact, it's really weird to say that when we do cardio for heart health. It's essentially what you're doing is you're working your heart a little harder to make it healthier. It is the most endurant thing in your body. And so, that's a good way to make it healthier. Well, it's sort of the same thing when you add lean mass. Now, body weight, that's different. If you're 300 pounds and you're 5'5", you're going to have a problem because it's going to be too much mass. It doesn't matter if it's muscle or fat. But within the realm of norms, that's something that nobody is ever going to have to worry about. And you're going to have a hard time tacking on muscle no matter what you do. So no worries there either. But basically, when you add muscle in a focused way, right, you can add quite a bit. Now, typically, you're only going to be I'm going to just bust everybody's bubble here. You're only going to be able to add somewhere between 3 and 7 pounds of legitimate lean mass in a year if you have not already lost that mass through a cut. Now, if you're a beginner, you can gain much more. You can gain something like 10 pounds a year for like 2 years, which is a lot. That's a lot of muscle you could tack on. But for intermediate and advanced athletes, I don't care what anyone out there is telling you. There is no miracle diet and there is no miracle workout program. They are not going to put 15 pounds of muscle on you in a year. It's just not going to happen. And the reason it's not going to happen is because there's no mechanism by which to do it. You cannot eat more calories and force muscle to grow. That's not how muscle grows. It grows by stimulus, right? The reason we feed ourselves more in a bulk is so that we can do more work and get more stimulus, and that helps us grow muscle more. So that's one thing. You need a focused time to put muscle on. Now, some people can gain muscle in shorter periods of time because genetically they're more gifted, or it might be a muscle system that they are more gifted in that they're focusing on, right? Like their legs might grow quickly or their arms might grow quickly. And so they may see some faster progress in certain areas of the body, but in general, that's going to be the truth for almost anybody. So you will need focused phases as you get into the intermediate and advanced stage, where you are building muscle with a purpose, right? You're not worried about your aesthetics at that point. You're not worried about any of that. You are worried about gaining muscle. You're measuring that by your intensity and progressive overload in the gym, some of the weight on the scale, your appearance in the mirror, all those good things. And so you'll need phases to build muscle, right? And the more muscle you have, the easier it is to cut the fat when it comes time to cut. Okay. And so you want to cut the fat because you can't forever just stay lean. When you gain muscle mass, you will also gain fat tissue. It is guaranteed.
Right.
And I don't
there's
care
ways to mitigate the rate of gain.
Yes. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. But I don't care how small the deficit is. Some fat's coming along for the ride. Yeah. Unfortunately. And yes, I would say, you can mitigate that, as much as you need to. Now, if you're a powerlifter, you're a strongman, you're prepping for a competition, I wouldn't worry too much about it, because we're not, the purpose of the peak there is not aesthetics. The purpose of the peak there is to just get the leverages and weight that you need to move. And so that's perfectly fine. That's a totally different animal. But even for powerlifters and strongmen, they need to have hypertrophy focused blocks where they are looking to build the belly of a tissue, right? So that they can be stronger with that tissue, have more nervous recruitment, things like that. And so every athlete has to have some kind of focused muscle building, and every athlete will want to have some kind of focused cutting. For non-athletes, you want to do this because it's a gradual and simple approach to building your physique to be what you want it to be. You'll need to add muscle in the places that you want to add muscle, which means you'll need focused blocks where you're focusing on certain muscles or certain lifts, right? And then you'll need focus blocks where you go, hey, I need to sort of lean down a little bit because I've been eating a little too much. I'm gaining a little bit too much body fat, getting a little too soft. Maybe my cardio is harder to do, etc. And I want to lower my body fat percentage to sort of see where I'm at with my strength or with my physique at that lower body fat percentage. And then maintenance is really important because you're not always going to be able to fluctuate between bulking and cutting. If you do that, you're going to burn out. It's like the worst thing in the world. It's awful, right? Yo-yo dieting is like the worst thing. And psychologically, it's hard. The ability to simply maintain the body that you have built, the strength that you have built for a period of time is a really great discipline. And also it helps your body become sort of more normalized metabolically during that period of maintenance so that your bulk and then your cut is more effective going forward. So you have to periodize, because if you don't, basically you're either going to gain fat forever, right? Which is unfortunate, or you're not going to gain any muscle, which is also unfortunate. And then you won't ever be able to maintain your weight. You'll be fluctuating. You'll be on this roller coaster of ups and downs. And so periodizing diet is sort of the best way to do that on a macro level. And I can suggest a simple template for people that are just lifestyle folks. It's easy, right? In the fall and winter, you focus on tissue building, right? You set a limit on body fat percentage or waist circumference, or some kind of metric that is reliable.
Okay? Yeah, some non-scale metric.
Yeah, the scale metric's tough there, right? Because it's really tough to track. And so something like waist circumference, right, is a really good way to track it. And you go, I'm going to go this far and no further on waist circumference. And so you can measure that, from week to week and kind of see where you are. But basically, you're going to take those fall and winter months to put on a little bit of weight. You will put on a little bit of body fat. That's okay. That'll help you be comfortable. As you train, you're going to train harder during that time. You're going to train yourself to death during that time. That's the time to do it.
Use the food.
Yeah, use the food that you're eating. And then when you get to the end of that, the hope is that you've reached sort of close to that waist circumference, but have not surpassed it, right? And then when the spring comes, you will do a cut, because if you've been moderated in your weight gain through the fall and winter, it's only going to take you 8 to 12 weeks to cut the fat off. You have not gained that much body fat. And so if you think about gaining something like 16 pounds and you've put on, 5 pounds of muscle, cutting 11 pounds is so easy. You can almost do it in your sleep.
Water will come off really quickly at first. And then.
Yeah, that's a really easy number to get to, right? My guess would be that if you do a 12-week diet, you probably lose a lot more than that if you're doing it correctly. And so that's kind of how that looks. And then the summer, you just maintain, right? You maintain the weight that you've cut to, and then you look to bulk again in the fall and winter. And you can do that cycle until you have reached whatever body shape, body composition that you like, or whatever strength levels you like if you're doing strength work, right?
There are so many seasons to everything in life. Even if you look at the kind of crops that grow, there's, more root vegetables, things like that available in the winter, more things like tomatoes, squash, stuff like that in the summer. Depending on where you live, obviously that season can change a little bit, but it's even that shows us, the Lord created us to eat certain things at certain times. And so we've gotten really far from that, thinking that we can just maintain the same amount of calories for life. We've lost the seasonality understanding of even how us and our bodies function.
Yeah.
So we talk about this a lot also, is how much sun exposure you get. It's very hard to get that in some places, especially in the winter. So all around us, we can see evidence that these things are seasonal. So it makes sense that even your training and your diet would be seasonal. And this is actually one of the ways, maybe not the exact season, but there are some telltale signs, like if you've been on the same calories for a while, that it's time to kind of come out of that. And I think one of the first ones, especially just for those lifestyle folks, is mental fatigue. You're just fatigued from this diet. This is a lot of times when I especially hear a lot of women say this, that, oh, the diet worked for a while and now I'm just plateaued, so it doesn't work for me, which is not necessarily true. It was working. And now you're at a point where it's time to make some changes. So it could be maybe your metabolism has adapted to the point where you need to drop calories a little more, you need to add a little more cardio, or it could be time to come out of that and be at maintenance for a little while. So the mistake that's often made is coming out of a diet, then you just scrap everything you just did. And now you're not following a plan at all. And that is a very easy way to get back to the place that you were trying to get away from.
Yeah.
So that's when periodization is very important for someone. That's just a weight loss example, but someone who's losing weight and finds themselves in a plateau. The plateau is a sign for something to change.
Right.
So
yeah, and
you just have to figure out what the next step is.
One of the things there too is to determine, like you said, the cause of the plateau, right? That's really where a good coach will step in and say, okay, let me look at your macros every day. Let me see what you're eating every day. Send me pictures of your meals. Let's have a look at where we are, because, we need to determine, is it mental fatigue? Is it a metabolic block? Is it something where we need to increase activity? Or maybe even we're overworking in the weight room and we need to back off that and add some more cardio instead, for the sake of recovery. I mean, because the reality is that probably 70% of plateaus are because people underreport what they eat. And that's a mental fatigue thing, just like you mentioned. It's like, hey, you're snacking more, you're underreporting. And the reason you're doing that is because you are sick of your diet. So we need to come out of that and heal that mental fatigue for a few weeks, and then go back in again, because it's really rare unless folks are really lean, right? It's really rare for a calorie cut not to work for an extended period of time. If it's significant enough, if it's somewhere like 400 or 500 calories a day, that should work for an extended period of time. In fact, you should be able to run that almost the entire way through the diet. If it's somewhere between 8 and 12 weeks, if that's not working, something is going wrong somewhere. And the likelihood is, for most people, and this is just for everyone's education that's listening, you're just sick of your diet, and so you're just eating, and you're not reporting what you're eating. You're just lying about what you're eating, and that's okay. It's just a thing.
Taking a bite here or there while you're cooking or whatever it is.
It's just a thing we need to realize. Like, I'm sick of this, and so I'm not doing it correctly. That's 70% of the cases. In the other cases, we can look at what's being eaten and go, well, maybe the mix of foods is not correct. Maybe we need to raise protein a little bit and drop carbs a little bit, or maybe fat is creeping up a little too high and want to reduce that some, or maybe we'd rather eat fibrous fruits for most meals instead of regular starch for every meal, and some things like that. So lots of solutions, right? But in most cases, to your point, it's going to call for a diet break, probably of some kind.
Yeah, absolutely. And then another thing to keep an eye out for on long cuts is, of course, hormone health.
Right.
We talk about hormone health all the time over here at High Calling Fitness. So we don't have to go super in depth on that. But if you're one of these perpetual dieters and you're getting some different thyroid numbers in your labs than you used to, then it's time to pull back. Some people are just going to diet till they're blue in the face because they've got to hit that number on the scale. They won't come out of it for any reason, and you're tanking all of your levels. You're ruining your thyroid, your sex hormones. Your cortisol is going to be through the roof. And all of that is going to keep you from reaching your goals. So that's a huge reason, on top of the mental fatigue, to come out and do a maintenance for a little bit. And there's a little bit of psychological difference going on for different people there. Sometimes mental fatigue will drive somebody to, like we just talked about, unknowingly make these changes where they're not, necessarily following it. Some others with mental fatigue are going to go to extremes to keep on this cut for any, they will just not stop it. They'll just keep doing all of these things that end up being destructive behaviors. Yeah. So how would you handle that kind of a situation?
Yeah, I mean, so there's some psychological counseling to be done there, right, straight away. That is anorexia. There's no other name for that. People that continue to essentially go more extreme and drop calories and refuse to eat for the sake of their image have body dysmorphia. And they need to understand that this is not a healthy way to look at yourself. And they need to understand that it's an unreasonable conclusion. There is no benefit to reducing your overall health, to reduce your weight on the scale. And they also need to understand your body's going to fight you until you're just completely starving and unhealthy. Right. Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not advocating for like starvation mode myths or anything like that. Trust me, if you starve somebody, they'll lose weight. But the point is, it may take a while for that to sort of start the downward trend again, because their body's going to do everything it can to stop them from losing weight, including making it hard to wake up by disrupting sleep. It's going to be hard for you to do activity. This is a great example of this. And I know, Amanda, you've probably run into this too, is when you get close to prep, when you get close to the end of the prep, you get to peak, you have to do like 2 or 3 times as much cardio to burn the same amount of calories because you're just so down-regulated. You are so tired. Yeah. You cannot, it feels like you're putting in the effort you were before, but you're just not because you're so tired.
Heart rate's hard to get up to the right zone and all of that.
Yeah. And so first and foremost, we need to heal the psychological processes there. Now, if somebody is going to that other extreme, they need to immediately stop. And you need to say, hey, we're stopping. There is no diet. We're stopping. And they need probably a period of time where they have unsupervised eating, which I know sounds crazy coming from a coach. They need to eat sort of whatever they want for 2 or 3 weeks. Right. They're not going to make any appreciable fat gain in that time, partially because they're just not going to be able to eat the quantities they need to do that straight away off a cut. And the likelihood is if they try to, they're going to get sick. So it's just, that's not really going to work. I know it sounds crazy, but these folks need a couple weeks, 3 weeks of unsupervised eating, and they need counseling from a coach or someone else if they have a really serious systemic issue along the way to ensure that we don't have another bout, right, of what we would call really disordered eating. And that's you have to understand that this is something that's really serious. We don't use these words the way that they're used in popular culture, but in the way they're used in medicine. But this is a psychotic break, right? This is where a person disconnects from reality and decides they're going to sort of force their own reality, right, by building it from things that are not really great materials, right? And so when people go into that mode, they are having sort of a psychotic break. They need some psychological healing. And it's unlikely it's the diet that did it. It's likely that there was some external factor, either someone in their life or their own mind, or they had issues before that you weren't aware of, or something like that comes up and gets exacerbated, right, by the difficulty of the diet and the pressure that they put on themselves. And so this outcome is probably worse than the person who underreports, right? Because there's so much psychological damage happening there, especially with their relationship with food and their body in the mirror and some things like that. So that can get really unhealthy. That's what I would do. I think the psychological factor has to be addressed straight away. The diet has to end. And they've got to sort of just eat like a human that wants to eat whatever comes in front of them for a little while.
Right. Yeah, I know that kind of situation kind of falls outside of diet periodization necessarily, but it is somebody who is just on a cut for so long that they don't really realize that there's, maybe it starts as they just don't really realize they're supposed to periodize out of it. And now it's an obsession. Yeah. And this can happen with almost anything, not to get stuck on this for too long, but even with orthorexia, those people with orthorexia, they are doing these diet phases, but it's so obsessive that they just can't get off of this plan.
Right.
So it is good to have a plan. This many weeks I'm going to be doing a cut, this many for maintenance, this many for bulk. But we do have to be really careful with the obsessive nature that it can cause. So you can periodize without tracking everything. This is something that, anyone should be able to do, even by hand portion sizing, but just by, knowing what it looks like on your plate to increase, decrease, which is one of the benefits of eating kind of the same foods most of the time. And being able to, this is why we all have staple recipes in each of our homes, is you can kind of look at the plate and understand how to adjust it without having to track it or anything. So diet periodization is not something that's just for athletes, that's for tracking, those who are tracking every gram that's coming into their mouth. This is something that absolutely anybody can use. And you are right with the body fighting. The body wants to have some homeostasis. Like it wants this survival. Well, first your body's going to fight to survive, but if you're surviving well, it's going to fight for this homeostasis, this staying at the same place, this set weight is, I've also heard it called. Mm-hmm. So when you are doing these periods where you're bulking or you're cutting, you are teaching your body that you don't want that to be
right.
your middle anymore. You're wanting to move this window higher for muscle gain, lower for fat loss. Like you're having to actually, this is what's going on is you're giving your body signals. Yeah. But if you're eating more food, you're getting more rest, you're doing things with your muscles, you're telling your body, I would like this surplus that I'm taking in to go onto my body as muscle. And vice versa, if you're losing weight and you've decreased your calories, you are telling your body, as long as you're still in the gym, because you can lose muscle mass if you stop doing that. As long as you're still working the muscles, you're telling your body, this is the tissue I want to keep. We can get rid of the other stuff, the fat. So this is how diet works alongside training. So we've gone over training periodization on a prior episode, and this one being diet periodization. How do those go together? Like, do you always have to have them on the same? Like, I'm doing a 6-week phase. Does this diet also last 6 weeks? Can I switch it in the middle?
No.
What are your thoughts?
No, you have a ton of freedom. In fact, this is where microcycling probably comes in best. So, for example, if you are on a bulk, and let's say that you've got 4 mesocycles that are 4 weeks long, right, in the bulk, and then a week of deload in between. So you got 20 weeks, right, and so you're going to be bulking for 20 weeks, and you've got a diet that's sort of periodized towards that bulk. Well, let's say that you get 10 weeks in, and you go, okay, I've gained way too much body fat. I've overeaten by quite a bit, or I've missed too many sessions, and now I'm gaining weight. Even on a bulk, right? Even with that same routine, you can still keep that programming, right? But you would microcycle some of your calories back, and so you would say, well, I'm still going to eat at my bulking calories on training days, and on non-training days, I'm going to reduce the amount of calories I'm eating. And you can do that in whatever way you want, right? You can just reduce the number, and you can just track differently. For me, I do fruit and roughage fasts, right, where that's all I eat during a day to sort of get water and fiber into my system and kind of give my digestion, a little bit of extra oomph, right, to make sure that I'm not over consuming calories, but I've still got all the energy I need to work out. Through additional carbs, et cetera. So there's all kinds of things that you can do there. And here's a great example. If you're using hand portions, like hand and fist portions and finger portions for fats, you can do things like, I lift on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, or Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday is cardio day, Sunday is a complete rest day. Well, on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, your meals can look like 2 fist-sized portions of protein, and 2 fist-sized portion of carbs, 1 fist-sized portion of vegetables, right? And you can go, and then a finger size of fat. And you can go, that's a plate, right? And I'm going to eat 4 plates on workout days that look like that. On non-workout days, I'm going to do 2 portions of protein. Now I'm going to do 1 portion of carbs and 2 portions of vegetables on the same plate. And so now we've adjusted the calories down a little bit by just increasing vegetables and decreasing starch, and then a finger-sized fat for each. And so that's a really simple way to do it. You can microcycle in whatever is needed. Now, the other way you can microcycle is if you are not gaining enough weight, right? You may be in a place where you just physically cannot eat enough healthy food to get to where you're going. And so this is sort of where you can go, I'll take a day or 2 of the week and I need to increase my calorie consumption. So I'm going to add, for example, like ice cream at the end of the day, 2 servings of ice cream, right? Or 4 cookies at the end of the day. And you go, well, that's not really healthy. I know the point is to just get in the calories. And
something palatable.
Yeah. And if you're eating 90% of the stuff you're eating is extremely healthy, and then you have a bowl of ice cream at the end of the day just to make your calories, that is not going to make a difference. I just don't care what anybody says. It's just not going to make a difference. But it will make a difference in your ability to consume. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing this with like fruit juices or sodas or anything like that. I would say at least take in something that is solid food, that's maybe just a little higher in fat content, so that you can get those extra calories in. And so those are just different ways that you can be flexible. You don't have to do that. And then a lot of times what happens is during a bulk, you'll hit a mini cut. You'll go, well, I'm 16 weeks in, I'm going to mini cut for a couple of weeks and then go back in for those last couple of weeks. And so you may severely restrict calories for 2 weeks or 3 weeks and then go back in and finish the bulk out, right? Because maybe you've lost your appetite.
Without really adjusting the training program, just keeping on.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's, and in fact, I'm like notorious for not adjusting my training. This is one thing that people hate when I put them on mini cuts because I'm like, it's not necessary because it's such a short time, right? And so they'll stay on their bulk program, but they'll have 2 weeks where it's just, man, they really don't have a ton of calories. And that's okay because it's going to accomplish what we want to accomplish in a very short time. And they go right back to what they were doing. So, and the reason they can go right back to what they're doing is because we have periodized it along the way. We know where we are in the process. Right. And so that's fine. And so even during maintenance, you may say there are times where I have more celebrations and things like that. So I'm going to stay at the top of my 5-pound range, right, that I have. And then there are times where I'm going to cut back. I'm going to stay at the lower part of maybe like a 0 to 1 pound part of that range. And so you are not stuck, right? You can always shift your diet around in little microcycles in between the mesocycles of the diet. I do recommend, however, checking yourself at the end of a training meso to see how your diet is working.
Yeah, it definitely serves as kind of a checkpoint. It's when you may be entering a new cycle. You may have all new workouts. You may have the same workouts, but a completely different weight structure or whatever. But it's always a good, stop, look at where we've been, look at where we're going, and does there need to be a change to the diet as well?
Yeah.
So you mentioned, of course, if you're gaining or having trouble gaining, having ice cream or cookies or something like that. Yeah. So it begs the question, is a cheat day or a cheat meal part of periodization? Now I'm talking about the kind where people think, oh, I've been good for 6 days, this is my cheat day.
Yeah, no. I'm going to be like the worst wet blanket on this. No, I hate cheat days. I don't believe in them. When you're on it doesn't matter if you're on a bulk or a cut, right? I just don't believe in it. Health-wise, it doesn't make sense. Consuming a bunch of that stuff for an entire day is really, really hard on your body. It is not healthy for you, and it's going to affect your performance and your body composition negatively because you're going to eat more than you think, right? It's really, listen, I can sit down and eat 8,000 calories without even thinking about it, right? I used to be 110 pounds, and so I used to do sort of the old school method of you put some oil on top of a large pizza and you eat that. It's like 4,000 calories.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I could do that all day long, no problem. You give me a box of donuts, that's 4,000 calories in a big box of donuts. I mean, I can smash that like this, right? And so if you're on a cheat day, the likelihood of those things happening is much higher. And I have a very
Mm-hmm.
particular client who I'm not going to name, but when he hears this, he's going to know who he is, who eats way too fast and consumes way too much food on a cheat day. And I have to literally go slow down, slow down, slow down. Because otherwise it just gets out of control, right? And people can go, well, I can moderate my cheat days. Well, yeah, whatever. It's just not a good idea, right? The better
Right.
idea is getting in the habit of eating healthier foods as your norm. And then when you go off plan, it really doesn't matter what or how much you eat. It doesn't make a difference. You don't have to plan a cheat day. You don't have to plan a cheat meal. You don't have to do any of that stuff, right? But the problem is everybody goes, well, what's my cheat day or what's my cheat meal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they underestimate how much they're going to eat, and it wipes out their deficit for the week, right? If they're losing fat, right?
Right.
And so I don't believe in them. It's not a good part of periodization. The better part of periodization is working your diet around those social events that you want to attend where you will potentially overserve yourself. Lots of ways to do this. I love the illustration of the glasses of water. I'm sure you've seen that on social media. You have 7
Mm-hmm.
glasses of water. These are your calories for each day. Well, you can cut 300 calories from each day, and you can eat that on the weekend if you want to, because calories don't work on a 24-hour cycle. It's like a weekly cycle and a monthly cycle
Yeah.
that you lose and gain body fat. And so you can do that. That's a really good way to manage that. And that's part of periodization, right? But what
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't do is go, okay, this day or this meal every week, you're just going to do whatever you want. Because here's the challenge. When I do that, I will say like, oh, I'm on a really strict diet, and I will cut for jiu-jitsu tournaments, which is a really, really tough cut. And they go, well, here's your cheat meal. And I'm like, cool. And then my coach will go, what did you have? And I'm like, yeah, 4 Chick-fil-A sandwiches and 3 large fries, right? Because that's what I want, you know? And so the real problem there is there's no definition behind what you're eating, right?
Uh-huh.
So even when you have a cheat and you're looking to lose fat, you need to do it strategically, right?
Definitely.
Or your fat loss along the way needs to be so consistent for so long that it doesn't matter, right? So
Yeah. It's very easy to reach for something that's very high in fat, very
yeah,
salty, which fats are fine. Salt is fine if you do those in the right amounts. And well, but our tendency is, if we have this cheat and we've been restricting carbs and fats a little bit all week, is that what we end up reaching for is very little or no protein at all,
right.
and huge amounts of fat and salt. And so the next day you're walking around like, why do I feel this way?
Yeah.
Because you did this cheat that was not planned correctly. In the bodybuilding world, we do have, you could call them planned cheats. We call them refeed days.
Yeah.
Those are really particularly timed, and you don't always get them. Sometimes you get to have one.
Yeah.
So those are meals where you get to have like a meal of more calories than normal, but there's still a range that you want to stay in. You still want a certain amount of protein. You can increase your carbs to X amount, but don't go over. You can increase your fat to X amount, but don't go over. So it's a little bit of a time to mentally kind of get a break. Also, the purpose for that is to kind of fill out the muscles a little bit temporarily. A lot of times that's done toward the end of a prep, so you can see kind of where you're at as like a test carb up or something like that. But even in the lifestyle world, a non-competitor, you can use things like that if you're, have a good craving for something you really want to kind of save up for or whatever. Still make sure you are getting your protein. Like I would say, if you know you're going out for a dinner or something like that, do something like you said, where you kind of take a little off of each day so you can save it up for that weekend. But on that day itself, you should already have your protein goal hit by the time you go to this event. You should already be very well hydrated by the time you go, because that will keep you from overdoing it quite so much. You'll already have some satiety, so you aren't just going to be devouring everything, rather than saving all your calories for that event.
Yeah, I think that, one of the other sort of easy tips that somebody can use is when you get to the event, take a very dense protein shake. So something like 50 to 60 grams, got to be pretty high, right? Drink it real fast. I mean, chug it, right? So chug that protein shake and then have a piece of fruit and then eat whatever you want. And you'll be surprised that you don't eat much, probably because you feel sick from eating so much protein and so much fiber in one sitting. But it is a great way to mitigate how much you serve yourself, right? And of course, there are other strategies that you can use. You can drink 0-calorie beverages. If you're getting a craving while you're at a place, you can use nicotine to help reduce some of that impulsiveness, right? It doesn't technically reduce appetite, but it does reduce the impulsiveness that appetite gives you, right, when you're around things that you find hard to resist. And so, there's some strategies there to do that. But yeah, no, I don't think I think planned cheats, I just don't like cheats, right? Like, it's just sort of be consistent on your diet. And then if you have a day where you just kind of go off plan, it really doesn't matter. I hate the idea of, like for lifestyle folks specifically, I hate the idea of like cheating on your diet. The whole point is, if your diet is locked in like 90% of the time, it really doesn't matter what else you eat. It just doesn't make a difference. Yeah, you can sit down and slam 5 pieces of pizza, and guess what? It's just not going to make a difference because you're just locked in the rest of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of in conclusion, it's good for anybody to periodize, lifestyle clients and athletes included. It just may look different. It's going to be less strict or more strict depending on what your goal may be. But the overarching thing here is consistency. If you're 90% consistent, then you'll get to your goals, whatever phase it may be, whether you're in maintenance or you're bulking or you're losing fat. If you are 90% consistent, you'll get there. So any last bits of information you want to add to this conversation?
Yeah, I think, one of the most important things is that folks are going to really struggle with doing this. And if you try to fly by the seat of your pants, you're really going to have a hard time. And so periodization helps with that. But not knowing how to periodize and not knowing what to periodize and when is going to be difficult. So what I would say is get a coach, right? I would say even if it's just for the first few months, right? Grab yourself a coach. They should be able to help you periodize your nutrition in a way that helps you reach your goals and shows pretty significant progress along the way. They should handle all adjustments for you and be able to tell you what you need to change, and also sort of call you to accountability when you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. And so that's one of the best ways to do it. And so if you need help with something like that, all the coaches, Amanda, myself, and Justin, everybody at High Calling Fitness, we are all excellent with nutrition. We can help you reach your goals. We can show you how simple nutrition can be in your life and how integrative it can become with your everyday life. So if you need a coach, reach out to us at www.highcallingfitness.com. You can fill out an application there to work with us. We do nutrition-only programs. We do nutrition and programming. We do programming only. We do all kinds of stuff. We do one-time plans. If it's just something you want to follow yourself and you already have a good knowledge of nutrition and you just need a little help setting up the periodization of it, we can do all of that. And so reach out to us for help. But if not us, then find somebody who's qualified to help you get started if you don't have the knowledge straight away.
Absolutely. It becomes habit before you know it. You just need to have a little bit of help sometimes along the way to get started.
That's right.
Well, thank you guys, everybody, for listening, and we'll see you next time. Gains and grace.
Gains and grace.